Hello everyone, this is my first video on English literature classes. Through these videos, I will try to focus on English literary history, language and literary works. It will be very helpful for all the graduate and the postgraduate students. I will also share important notes according to your necessity in our official website bathluka.com. So please like and share the videos and please subscribe for updates. Today we are going to discuss Anglo Saxon Age and Old English literature. This is our lecture 1 and this lecture has given a focus on the literary history of the Anglo-Saxon period and also the literatures written at this time. The history of English literature begins with Anglo-Saxon Age and the Old English literature. But before going to the discussion of Old English literature, we need to know about Anglo-Saxon Age, its certain features and social life. In the first half of the 5th century AD, three Germanic tribes, the Jutes, the Saxons and the Angles migrated to British Isles. Historically, this period is named after these invaders, Angles and Saxons. Anglo-Saxon comes from Angles and Saxons, and the time or the period that we are looking at is Anglo-Saxon Age. Now, first of all, we should know the time span. First of all, what is the time span? Historically, the period denotes the time between 450 and 1066. From 450 AD to 1066, and 1066 is the Norman conquest, and before that the time is attributed to Anglo-Saxon Age. After the invasion of these three tribes, the local Celtic population were pushed into the mountains and infertile regions of the west and the north. The western regions and the northern regions of the British Isles were then very infertile, and the people were forced, tribal people, the people who were living there for a long time, they were just forced to go those places. And now first these tribes who came from German, they set up in Northumbria, then in Mercia, and finally in Wessex. Okay, now in 865 AD, a second serious conquest occurred by the Vikings invaders and united the whole country under Saxon kings. Now we will know who are the Vikings, but before that we should know about King Alfred, because King Alfred and his successors established political and religious stability in England at that time. Okay, and the last two Saxon kings after King Alfred, the last two Saxon kings were Edward the Confessor and Harold II. Edward the Confessor, the time of Edward the Confessor was from 1042 to 1066, and then Harold II, and then 1066 the invaders or conquest of Normandy, means Norman conquest. Now they inherited a more advanced kingdom than before, more advanced kingdoms. Here three important topics are written. In Britain, Ireland, northern France, Celtic tribes had settled there for a while. Germanic tribes settled around this area in Europe, and the Romans were a force to be reckoned with, and Britain was a part of the Roman Empire until 410. Now this is totally before 450, and after that the three Germanic tribes settled in England. Now we should know who were the Vikings. Now we should know who were the Vikings. Actually, the Scandinavian raiders who raided Scandinavia, Danes, Norwegians and Swedes. Danes, Norwegians and Swedes were called Vikings by English. And they settled in the parts of England. Now, as a result of it, what happened? A mixture of language happened, because they came with different languages, and now one language is still in Britain. So there is a mixture of language, and it enriched actually the English language. When we will go through the history of English language, we will find that different languages came into England, into English, and this language has become a mixture of various types of languages. Now, this is also notable that Germanic Anglo-Saxon tribes had pagan culture. Yes, and warlike ethos. They have a kind of spirited war monsters actually. We cannot say them monsters, but the warmongers, they are too much involved in war. But in the 7th century, conversion to Christianity happened, and it made a great change in language and literature. So next topic of discussion is conversion to Christianity, because Christianity is the major important fact in that period. Conversion to Christianity. In the history of English literature, 597 is important, as St. Augustine's mission arrived at Kent, and this was the beginning of the Christianization. This was the beginning of the Christianization in Scotland and northern England. The Celtic monks actually initiated the Christianization, but they were not so successful. This conversion by those Celtic monks was very slow, but in the south, monks under St. Augustine worked with great positive result. St. Augustine had made a great impact on the people. Pope Gregory I, means for the first, Pope Gregory I had sent St. Augustine to preach gospel in England, and he converted first King Ethelbert of Kent. Now that made a great impact, because the king himself converted himself to Christianity. The king bestowed on St. Augustine the positions of the first Archbishop of Canterbury, and St. Augustine became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. This is important because Christianity came into England after that. Next topic of discussion, Anglo-Saxon literature. Now, after the features of history of Anglo-Saxon, means Old English period, we should also know how literature was influenced at that time. Anglo-Saxon literature, after the history of Anglo-Saxons, the literature of Anglo-Saxon period included in Old English literature, and this can be divided into three categories. Anglo-Saxon pagan or pre-Christian poetry, Anglo-Saxon Christian poetry, and then Anglo-Saxon prose. Pre-Christians or pagan poetry, it includes Anglo-Saxon heroic poetry. Beowulf is the pagan epic. Beowulf is called the Anglo-Saxon epic poem, but this is also considered to be a pagan poem, heroic poem. And there also some Anglo-Saxon lyrics and elegiac poetry are also included. Now, after the Christianity, that Christian influence also occurred in England and in literature. And that's why Christian poetry is found in history of English literature. It includes Caedmonian poems and Cenulph's poems. Caedmon and Cenulph were the two most important Christian poets at the times, and through their writings, the Christianity came to the people. Now, number 3, Anglo-Saxon prose. Here, Elfric, Wulfstan, 3 writers, Elfric, Wulfstan, 3 writers will be brought into discussion. Beside this, the great prose work, Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, will be discussed. So, Anglo-Saxon Christian poetry and also Anglo-Saxon Christian poetry enriched the Anglo-Saxon literature. So in this class, we have discussed about the basic of the Anglo-Saxon literature and also the history of the Anglo-Saxon period and the time span of that period and why it is very important, why we should know before studying the literature. This is the much important topic of discussions of today. Now in our next class, we will discuss about the Anglo-Saxon pagan or pre-Christian poetry. And our notes, important notes on these topics will also be available very soon in our official website pathluka.com. So keep eyes on our next video. Thank you very much. Goodbye.